I've noticed something, sitting quietly with my coffee in the mornings. The biggest financial mistakes rarely look like mistakes when you make them. They feel like relief. They look like opportunity. They sound reasonable. And later, when the dust settles, you realize they took away something you can't easily replace: time, peace, options. In retirement, one wrong move can do more harm than any bear market, because now your margin for error is thinner. You can't simply work 10 more years to rebuild. The math of your life has changed. The stakes feel heavier. And that's why I want to talk with you, calmly, not to scare you, but to keep you safe. I'm an old investor, very old. I've seen 4, 5, 6 full market cycles depending on how you count them. I've watched inflation bruise a generation, greed bruise another, and in every era, I've seen the same pattern dressed in new clothing. I've made expensive mistakes. Most of the people who taught me did too. That's where the lessons come, from scar tissue and quiet reflection. When I look back, what helped the most was never the clever tactic. It was the guardrails I put up before I got tired, before I got scared, before I got tempted. Those guardrails saved me when the world got noisy. The market has a way of testing your resolve after you've already made a decent plan. It's not hard to get rich in America if you're patient. It's hard to stay calm when you finally have something to lose. If you're nearing retirement or living it now, the anxiety you feel is normal. I've felt it too. So have engineers who could run circles around me in calculus. So have nurses who managed triage with steady hands. So have small business owners who built something from nothing. Smart people get nervous when a paycheck stops, and the media reminds them daily of every way things can go wrong. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're human. The fear of making an irreversible mistake late in life is a sensible fear. It means your mind understands that time isn't a renewable resource. Let me reframe what the real risk is. Most people think the danger in retirement is the stock market. I think the bigger danger is unforced errors. That's where people lose their dignity. Not from a 20% market drop that eventually recovers, but from chasing yield that didn't exist, paying fees they didn't see, spending from feelings instead of a plan, over-helping family out of guilt, or locking into something complicated because a smooth salesperson wore a nice suit. Those are the moves that shrink your options. Those are the final warnings no one whispers into your ear before the pen hits the paper. In retirement, your job changes. For 30 or 40 years, your job was to build a snowball. Now your job is to keep the snowball intact while it still grows enough to beat inflation. You don't need to swing for home runs. You need to avoid striking out. A defensive investor lives longer in this game. Here's the math, kept simple, because the right decisions here don't require a PhD. In retirement, you're making 2 kinds of trades: time for money and risk for peace. If you take a 5% withdrawal from $1 million, that's $50,000 a year. If your Social Security is $30,000, you're living on $80,000 before taxes. On paper, that sounds fine. But if the market drops 20% early in your retirement, this is called sequence risk. Your million becomes $800,000 at the wrong time. Now that same $50,000 withdrawal is 6.25% of a smaller base. That's a problem if it continues. If instead you anchored at 4%, that's $40,000 from the million. Combine it with Social Security and you have $70,000. It's not as exciting, but it's sturdier. If a big drop comes early, $40,000 from $800,000 is 5%. Not comfortable, but survivable with a little flexibility. Boring math. And boring math is what keeps people wealthy. Inflation is the slow leak. At 3%, your purchasing power halves in about 24 years, rule of 72, so you can't hide entirely in cash. A retiree's money needs to grow enough to keep up. Dividends that grow, broad market funds, low-cost bonds, Nothing fancy, just strong, simple tools stacked together. Fees are the guaranteed headwind. A 1% advisory fee on $1 million portfolio is $10,000 the first year. The market won't guarantee you anything next year. That fee will. Over 20 years, even if your money grows, that 1% siphons off hundreds of thousands of dollars that could have been yours. I'm not saying never pay for advice. I'm saying pay for planning and discipline, not for someone to buy the same mutual funds you could buy for 0.05% on your own. Now, let me offer a few lessons, each tied to a story I've watched play out more times than I can count. A retired teacher and a nurse sat at their kitchen table with me nearly 20 years ago. Their hands were steady, but their voices were tight. "We can't afford a mistake," they said. They had about $900,000 saved, plus Social Security. They were nervous because the headlines were loud. We built a simple plan, 2 years of spending in cash, a balanced portfolio of low-cost index funds, and a spending band. In good years, they'd draw 3.5%. In bad years, they'd reduce spending by 10% and let the portfolio heal. That was it. No magic. They followed it. They sent me pictures from national parks. They sent me pictures from cheap diners. They never had the highest return of anybody at church. But they still have money today, and, more importantly, they still have their peace. The lesson is to spend from a plan, not from feelings. Feelings are loud at midnight. Plans don't raise their voice. A 2-year cash buffer isn't to juice returns, it's to protect your behavior. When the market drops, you pay the bills from cash and avoid selling shares at bad prices. Your cash is a moat around your castle. It doesn't make you rich. It keeps your enemies out. Another lesson: avoid concentration. In the late 90s, neighbors laughed at me for holding boring index funds when tech stocks were taking off like fireworks. In 2009, other neighbors wondered how they could load up on bank stocks at rock-bottom prices. Both groups were confident. Both forgot they were retired. Concentration can work on the way up, but it turns you into a forced seller on the way down. You don't have the luxury of time that a 5-year-old has. Diversification is an admission that you don't know the future. It's not a weakness. It's humility turned into a tool. Chasing yield is another silent thief. A smooth voice promises 8%, 10%, 12% income, as if it's a gift. There is no free lunch. If something offers a much higher yield than the sober alternatives, you're either taking credit risk, liquidity risk, or you're being sold your own principal back with a bow on it. I've seen retirees lean into complex products they didn't understand because the word guarantee was in the brochure. Understand what's guaranteed. Often, it's the fee you'll be paying. Speaking of fees, I'll say it plain. Every dollar you pay in fees is a dollar you can't spend on your grandchildren, your health, your peace. If you choose to pay for advice, know what you're buying. Are you getting a comprehensive plan? Tax guidance tailored to your situation? Behavioral coaching that keeps you from selling in a panic? Or is someone charging you 1% to pick funds you could choose yourself for 1/10 of that? The market gives and takes. Fees only take. Now let me tell you about sequence of returns in human terms. A gentleman retired in 2007 with $1.2 million. He wanted to draw 5% because 5% felt round. The market dropped nearly 50% over the next 18 months. He kept drawing $60,000 per year because that's what the budget said. His $1.2 million became roughly $650,000 at the bottom, and then $590,000 after withdrawals. By the time the recovery came, he had a smaller base to recover from. He wasn't ruined, but he lost options he didn't need to lose. If he had drawn 4% and tightened the belt 10% for 2 years, his 80s would have looked different. The right withdrawal rate is the one you can sustain through the bad years without losing sleep. No one brags about that at barbecues. But the quiet ones enjoy more summers. Another point that rarely gets its due: debt. In retirement, debt is risk without much reward. A paid-off house is not just shelter, it's a sleep machine. If you can earn a guaranteed 6% by paying off a mortgage at 6%, it's the same as buying a rock-solid bond. People tell me, but I might make more in the market. You might, and you might not, especially in a year when you need to sell to make the payment. There's a season for leverage. Retirement is not that season. Taxes and timing matter, but they don't have to be complicated. In the years between retirement and your required distributions, you might have lower income. That can be a window to move some money from pre-tax accounts to Roth accounts at lower brackets. Think of it as paying taxes on sale, not at full retail. But be mindful. Medicare has premium surcharges if your income crosses certain lines. Each situation is different. The principle isn't to outsmart the tax code, it's to avoid obvious traps and smooth your income. A little attention here can save more than any hot stock tip. Helping adult children is a beautiful thing. It can also be the fastest path to emptying your canteen in the desert. I've seen people take on debt to gift down payments. I've seen people guarantee business loans. I've seen it go well, and I've seen it go badly. The pattern is this: if you give beyond your plan, you endanger the person you're trying to help. The strongest gift you can give your children is not a check. It's not becoming their financial responsibility at 83. Set boundaries with love. If you can help, do it from the surplus your plan allows. If you can't, give time, wisdom, childcare, a co-signed Saturday at the hardware store. Money is one way to help. It's not the only way, and it's not always the best way. There's also the risk we don't like to admit: our own future selves. Cognitive decline doesn't announce itself politely. It can arrive slowly. Simplify now, while you're sharp. Fewer accounts. Automatic bill pay. Clear beneficiaries. A trusted person who knows where things are and how to help. A short, plain language letter that explains how to manage the basics if you're one day unable to. Complexity is impressive at 58. It's dangerous at 88. Scams, unfortunately, are not rare. The scammer's best friend is urgency. If someone says you need to decide today, the answer is no, without apology. If something can't stand up to a weekend of quiet thinking and a second opinion, it wasn't solid to begin with. The older I get, the more I love the cooling off rule. If a decision feels big, sleep on it. Let it pass through one sunset and one sunrise. The right opportunity will still be there. The wrong one will evaporate like dew. Inflation deserves another minute. It's the thief that never knocks. Many retirees make the mistake of moving entirely to cash or long-term bonds. It feels safe. Until groceries, healthcare, and property taxes drift higher every year. That's why I still hold stocks in my later years. Not because I enjoy volatility, but because they represent real businesses, raising prices, innovating, paying dividends, and offsetting the erosion. The mix changes as you age, but the principle holds. Own things that can pass inflation through. You're not trying to win a race. You're trying to finish the marathon standing upright. Social security is another lever. For a healthy person with a normal life expectancy, delaying benefits increases the monthly check in a way that's tough to replicate elsewhere, and it's adjusted for inflation. Think of it as buying an annuity from the one provider that won't go out of business. It's not always right to delay. It depends on your health, your spouse, and your need for cash. But running the math at least once is not optional. A larger, inflation-adjusted income later reduces pressure on your portfolio during the years when healthcare costs often rise. That's not hype. That's common sense dressed in boring clothing. I also believe in setting a spending floor before you search for higher returns. The floor is what must be paid no matter what. Housing, food, utilities, insurance, basic transportation. Cover as much of it as you can with sources that don't depend on the market that month. Social security, pensions, maybe a modest annuity if it's simple and low cost. The surplus above the floor is where your portfolio can breathe. People sleep better when their non-negotiables don't depend on the Dow's mood. Now, let's talk about simple, intuitive math that gently clarifies the stakes. If your annual spending is $60,000 and you have $30,000 coming from Social Security, your portfolio must provide $30,000. At a 4% sustainable draw, that requires roughly $750,000. If you try to draw $30,000 from $500,000, that's 6%. Maybe it works in some years, but over a long retirement, it leans too heavily on luck. The math isn't judging you. It simply tells you whether your plan asks the market to do something it cannot reliably do. Adjusting spending by $300 a month can be the difference between drawing 4% and 5%. That small tilt can change the trajectory of the next 20 years. Fees again, because this one sticks to my ribs. A 1% advisory fee on $1 million is $10,000 the first year. If your portfolio grows on average and you pay that percentage for 20 years, it's not simply $200,000, because your portfolio could have compounded on that $10,000 each year. You're losing the goose and the future eggs. Even if it's only a few $100,000 in the end, tell me what you could do with a few $100,000 of options in your 80s. Fewer fees are not a philosophy, they're math. And the psychology, perhaps the most important part. Why do smart people make poor decisions in retirement? Because the mind is uncomfortable with stillness. After decades of productivity, stillness feels like slipping. So we fill the space with unnecessary tweaks. We check accounts 3 times a day. We change funds after 2 bad months. We read stories about someone making a killing and feel envy dressed as motivation. The antidote is not discipline as punishment, it's meaning. Decide what the money is for. If the money is for your sleep, your community, your grandchildren's summer trips, your health, you will treat it differently than if it's for points on a scoreboard no one is keeping. Let me paint a long-term picture. Imagine your life 10, 20 years from now. Your home is simple and paid for. Your bills are boring and predictable. You know, roughly, what comes in every month, and it covers the non-negotiables. You have a cash buffer that smiles at market tantrums. You own a few low-cost funds you don't have to explain at every family gathering. Your statements are short. Your passwords are written down somewhere safe. You help your children within your plan and no further. You say no to salespeople without explaining yourself. You walk most days. You lift something heavy twice a week so you can keep lifting yourself out of a chair. Your portfolio's line on a chart looks wiggly, but your life's line looks steady. You have options. You have dignity. This reality is not glamorous. You won't be the loudest story at the holiday table, but you'll be the one who loves that table the longest. Wealth in retirement is not about impressing anyone. It's about the quiet freedom to live according to your values without asking permission from the market every morning. So, what should you act on now, if anything? Not a stock pick, not a hot strategy. Act on removing the possibility of ruin. Pay off the wrong kinds of debt. Lower your fixed costs where possible. Set a sustainable spending rate. Announce to yourself and your spouse that you'll reduce spending slightly when markets are down and give yourselves a small raise when they're up, instead of the other way around. Consolidate scattered accounts into a simpler structure. Push fees down where you can. Put 2 years of required spending in a high-yield savings account or short-term treasuries so you don't flinch in a storm. Make sure beneficiaries and legal documents are current. Decide what you'll say the next time a salesperson offers urgency. Decide it now, not in the room with them. Here's a story that always returns to me. A neighbor of mine, a quiet man with good hands, liked to garden. He said something I use more than any chart. I plant for the drought now, not for the rain I hope to get. He didn't seed the garden assuming the clouds would be generous every month. He mulched. He chose plants that could handle dry spells. Then, when the rain came, his garden flourished, and when it didn't, his garden survived. Retirement planning is gardening. You prepare for bad seasons, knowing there will also be good ones. You build a moat with cash, a fence with diversification, and a well with low fees. You don't plant exotic flowers that look stunning but die in the first heat wave. There's a weight that lifts when you accept that you don't have to outsmart the market to win this stage. A portfolio that grows at 5–6% on average, with costs of 0.1–0.2%, feeding a 3.54% withdrawal that flexes a little in bad years, will outlast many fancy plans. It's not impressive math, it's boring math. And boring math is what keeps people wealthy. The last piece is emotional. Forgive yourself for not starting earlier, for mistakes you made when you were younger, for money you wish you saved. Shame is a poor planner. Start from where you are. If the numbers are tight, make one modest change that compounds. Lower your housing cost. Drive a car 2 years longer. Adjust your thermostat a degree. These don't feel like strategy, but they quietly move your withdrawal rate from 5% toward 4%, and that is the difference between needing a bull market and withstanding a bear. If you're listening and thinking, it might be too late, hear this. Peace can start this week. You can tighten the belt 5% without living miserably. You can close 3 old credit cards and keep the one you actually use. You can stop reading the loudest headlines. You can take a walk after dinner instead of checking the futures. That doesn't show up in a spreadsheet, but it shows up in your blood pressure. And if you're listening and thinking, we're fine, this is obvious, that's wonderful. Quietly pass this mindset to your children and grandchildren. Teach them that money behaves itself when you do. Teach them that the biggest purchase most people make in retirement is peace of mind, and it's paid for with patience, not with products. I'll end where I started. In retirement, the worst losses tend to come from decisions that felt harmless. So make your harm hard to reach. Don't keep the matches next to the gasoline. Put space between you and big choices. Default to no when someone rushes you. Default to simple when 2 paths look similar. Default to humble when you feel clever. The market rewards humility over a lifetime. This channel exists for people who prefer patience over noise. If that sounds like you, feel free to like the video and subscribe to Quiet Wealth. If you remember nothing else from today, remember this. Survival is the strategy. Stay in the game. Protect your downside. Spend a little less than you can. Own things that grow slowly and steadily. Let time do the work you no longer need to do. The big money is made in the waiting, and late in life, the real wealth is the quiet that waiting creates. Years from now, I hope you look around your simple home and feel a lightness in your chest. The bills are paid, the phone is quiet, the kids are fine, the market can do what it likes, because your plan already assumed that it might misbehave, and you decided to be fine anyway. That's not an accident. That's the oldest trick in the book, boring choices, repeated calmly for a very long time. It's not flashy, it's not catchy, but it works. And it leaves you with the one thing all the money in the world can't buy if you give it away too early: time you control, days you own, and the dignity of living life on your terms. That's quiet wealth.